in Africa, if you do it right, and this is the right way to do it, you still will not be successful unless you involve every tribe. You cannot drive a curriculum down into tribes unless they have been involved in some way in the process. So I left that meeting with my tail between my legs again. What the heck do I know about visiting tribes in Africa, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a guy from New Jersey,
Right.
right? This time it took longer than the first time before kind of something happened. It was at the African American Women in Cinema Film Festival. Tara Renee is a great woman. She's the founder of that, and I've known her for many years now through these circles, right?
Right.
And she invited Peace Lights to play again at the festival, the film festival. Actually, Peace Lights played at a bunch of film festivals. It's cool for a film festival.
Okay, this
It has
is
great
awesome.
great energy when people are coming into a screening or leaving, or when the directors are talking in the front off to the side. You know, it's a good thing to have at film festivals. So an elder woman from Kenya came up to me, and I had known her. Right, Jennifer Onomo is her name. A beautiful woman. Right, she took my hand and she kind of petted my hand. She looked me in the eye and she said, "Peter, you're doing God's work, my son. But they're right. You really have to visit all the tribes. But don't worry, my son. This is how you do it." She brought me over to a table and she sat me down and she laid it out. And by this point of this journey, right, I'm feeling like the universe is guiding me, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the first time I felt that way. In fact, it had been building that, you know, there's something here that I'm probably not fully aware of, but I'm going to kind of step forward on faith that, you know, I should be stepping on these next things, these next blocks that are being put in front of me. She says, you get teams of 3 and they visit the tribe. You get a retired teacher because they're respected, a retired doctor because they're respected, a retired government worker that's respected. You have to interview for these jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a leading youth, right? They go to the tribes, and they're not going to sell them on peace education. They're going to host a day of discussion on peace education. And importantly, they're bringing with them food and drink. That will ensure the elders come. More importantly, you set these meetings up through the women's and children's coordinator of the tribe. They'll get it. They'll understand it. They'll be passionate about it. They'll know the food and drink provider, so you're bringing some value back into the tribe, right?
Right.
There are women's and children's coordinators in every tribe in every country in Africa. And it's consistent with Resolution 1325 of the United Nations, which I knew nothing about, right? It turns out that after I looked that up, right, Security Council Resolution 1325 says that women should be taking a more active role in matters related to peace,
Yes.
especially long-standing peace. So I was like, wow, the universe just put a big piece in front of me here. It's like I said to Jennifer, I said, well, how much would you have to pay these people? How much does it cost to bring food to a tribe? And I set off to create a high-level, arm-waving, lots of assumptions, all listed, model. I came up with about $12.5 million, right? Initial, and these are bare bones numbers, right? The numbers have grown since then because the scope and effective and impactness of what we're doing has grown as well. But so there you have it. I started looking up. You have 371 tribes in Nigeria, 242 in Cameroon, and in fact, in Cameroon. This is an interesting thing I learned, right? In Cameroon, they didn't have on record 242. Our country manager in Cameroon, a woman by the name of Lillian Debo, who, by the way, is a person living with disability. She's an amazing woman, right? She went out and she got people from around the country, and they started doing this census, and they came up with more tribes than was on record at the whatever Ministry of Culture it is in Cameroon. And I tell people that we've already made a cultural contribution to Africa, there. And and then I've had people say to me, well, it's interesting that that's the way it was, isn't it? I said, what do you mean? Well, that could be seen as, certain classes, erasing other classes, certain
Ooh.
right, right.
Ooh.
Whoa,
Whoa,
you know,
whoa.
all of a sudden the head
Yes.
explodes, right?
Yeah.
Holy shit, you know, that's
Oh.
that, and I've come across those things on the regular, you know,
Yeah,
throughout this journey. That's a big one,
That's
right?
that's
Right?
huge.
Yeah. So makes you look at everything, right?
Yeah,
When you're dealing in this. So here we are, and you got 13 languages in Namibia. You got languages everywhere, right? In fact, what we're doing is we're as we do these days of discussion, we're going to make sure to get the word peace lights in every local language in all of Africa. And we're going to have a peace lights with all the local languages, all of them from Africa, and that's the goal. Because the goal is to go out and meet every single tribe initially, right?
Yeah.
So let's fast forward. February of 2020,
Mm-hmm.
I had invested in and formed Project Peace Lights. You know, I kind of paid for that and got this organization, this 501c3 NGO formed. We were going to launch. Peace Lights had done a 1-month installation at the Albano building at the UN. You know, I'd spoken at a couple other things, a bunch of things by then. And the launch for Project Peace Lights, the NGO, because Peace Lights is just a piece of art, right? The NGO Project Peace Lights has a mission to accelerate the timeline for peace education globally, initially in the African Union. And I've had people stand up when I've told this story, and they'd be like, you know, you should stay, let Africans take care of us, ourselves. You know, we have ways of educating our children. You know, you need it more here in America than we need it in Africa. Now, that stuff has come at me, right?
Yeah.
And
How do you handle that?
the first time I was like a little bit indignant, but I don't think I let it come out. But I'm like, hey, man, I can do whatever I want. You know, like I'm a human. I see this need. Who's to say I can't contribute because you're not doing squat about it, right?
How are you judging me on it when you're not doing anything?
Right? But I didn't say it like that, right? And you know, afterwards, I think, you know, man, I could have, and I actually wrote out, you know, this is what I wish I would have said. You know? That's the way you get better. You know, you got to constantly be striving to improve. So kind of got tangented there.
Yeah, so you know, you were explaining about how basically, all right, so you're getting all the tribes together.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So at this, go ahead.
So we were going to launch Project Peace Lights in February of 2020. I was because of all this stuff, and by then, you know, Peace Lights used to play at the Delegates Lounge every month for the jazz night, and you know, jazz night at the UN is like the guitarist is from China, the bassist is from Bangladesh, you know, and so on. And I'd have this little pin on my lapel that Ambassador Arikana Chiambori gave me. She was the ambassador from the African Union to the Americas. And I went down to D.C. to meet with her to tell her kind of what was shaping up in my mind, right? And she said, you know, Aspiration 4 is so important. It's like, but you're an outsider. It's like, yeah, that's the reason I was invited to review Agenda 2063. I am an outsider. It's like, you're going to need help. So she got up, she walked across her office into her closet, and she dug through her closet, and she came out with this pin. She actually gave me 2 of them. And she said, wear this. This will help. And I would, anytime I go to the United Nations, I wear this pin, or any event, you know, that's relevant. And I'd have ambassadors from African countries walk up to me, and they'd kind of give me the eyeball, look at the pin, point at the pin, and says, where'd you get that? And I'd tell them, I say, you know, what are you doing in Chad about peace education? You know, and I'd engage with all these. So I kind of got a real feel what was going on by access, right? So the tagline was going to be this Black History Month, give a gift to the children of Africa. And we saw COVID right on the doorstep. So we didn't launch, right? So here I am with an NGO, right? And really kind of in a holding pattern. I started to get invitations from youth in Africa to speak and tell this story on Zoom meetings. And I'd show up on these Zoom meetings, you know, 200 people, you know, 140 people, you know, like from all over Africa, right? And the very first one was organized, and the first time I was asked was from a Nigerian named Moses Abalade, right? Great guy. And he's actually has an organization called PEPNET, Peace Education Practice Network, right? And and I got a question from someone in northeast Nigeria.
Mm.
Said, Mr. Rogina, last week 83 of our girls were kidnapped by Boko Haram.
Oh my God.
How can what you're talking about help us in this situation? It was like another one of those, like wow, like
Yeah, yeah.
I try and think about what questions are coming before something, right? And I was just blindsided.
This is
And
tough.
I got almost the exact same question a couple months later from someone from Democratic Republic of Congo. So, but anyway, so meeting after meeting, and then I started getting phone calls again. A first call was from this guy Moses, right? To his credit, he says, Peter, I've been listening now to what you're doing. I'm passionate about it. I'm in education. Could I be the country manager for the activities here in Nigeria? And then it was, Ghana, and then it was boom, boom, boom. Before long at all, like a week or two, it was 10 countries, and I was like, hold on. Obviously, it's not too difficult to get people passionate about this because it's a good story, right? And it's impactful. But, I'm not convinced that I even know what it means to be a country manager, let alone that, just raising your hand, makes you qualified to be a country manager. This is going to be work. This is going to require leadership, management skills. We got to do
Attention to
stuff.
details. You got to be mobile on the ground.
You got to have your act together.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, right? And that's part of the training that we're going to provide, to help provide. But you got to have the basic skills, Otherwise, it's not an optimized equation. Right? You're not firing on all cylinders. So here we are, starting to get. I said, here's what I want to have happen. I want you all to go out to your networks, and we're going to host a Zoom, and invite all the people you want, and we're going to tell this story, and we're going to talk about kind of what it might mean to be a country manager and what has to be done and how we have to measure our success and so on, right?
Yep.
We started to get a lot more people interested in these roles and started to formalize the gatherings. And there has been some changes since then. So the Africans, and I feel like I'm kind of uniquely positioned. I can say the Africans,
Right.
The Africans said, we don't want to visit the tribes. It's like, no, we got to visit the tribes. That's what the ambassador said, and it makes sense, right? Like, no, but Africa is more than tribes. There's caliphates, kingdoms, chiefdoms. There's Egypt. There's cultures. And so I was like, well, what do you propose? And what came out of that discussion? And I'm a facilitator, right? One of the taglines of Project Peace Lights is "By Africans for Africa." I'm just a guy who's facilitating.
Yeah, you're
right?
the broker in the deal.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm just kind of there,
yeah,
right?
Yep.
And so they say ethnic groups, and we want to do these days of discussion regionally in the countries. So there's 31 regions in Tanzania. We want to do 31 days of discussion. Like, okay, well, what's that look like? You got to kind of hire a person, you hire a region manager. So you're creating jobs, which is good. You're creating 31 jobs. Yep. And we have later come up to the conclusion that we want to include all the refugee camps too, right? Because certainly refugeeism is one of the threats to peace, right? Especially with with climate change and everything like that. It's not like that's going to go away. And it's not like they don't have anything to say about it, right? Yep. So there's 3 refugee camps in Tanzania. So you got 34 jobs you're going to create right there. And you got a country staff. You got people who are going to facilitate these days of discussion, drive the conversation. These these region managers, their job is from the day they're hired, 6 months later, they deliver their day of discussion. Right? That's their job. And if you're going to do 1 per week, you're going to hire 1 new region manager every week. If you're going to do 2 per month, every other week, you're hiring a new region manager. Wow. And you're logistically managing this like a Microsoft projects project, right?
Right.
And you're doing it the right way, and you're taking names, and you're checking off boxes of every ethnic group that you can that you have to come in contact with. And even like there's a significantly, statistically significant portion of Chinese people in Cameroon. Make sure they're covered.
They have to also have their own.
There's a lot of Hindu presence in West Africa. Make sure that population is not forgotten. Right. It turns out, knowing demographics here, 9 to 11% is the number I always see of Africa is not black. Lighter than whatever skin of melanin, right? And those are Egypt plus colonial descendants and so on, right? And to put that in context, that's like California.
Like
it's a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's imagine California being, the part of Africa that's not African. Right. It's a lot. That is a lot of people.
So we get to this new model of regional days of discussion. Start talking about that, and I credit the team in Tanzania for coming up with the extension of this idea. Now, part of what Peace Lights had been involved with was playing at a lot of these events, and because of the screens that we'd bring to the events, there are other organizations that sometimes want to share a screen, or, hey, can I use the screen to do this? And it's always yes, right? So one of the organizations that I met early on was Youth for Human Rights International, the largest human rights education organization in the world. They have presence in 120-something countries.
I think I heard of them.
24 languages, and maybe it's more than 120 countries, 24 languages, though. And they got a curriculum. They got a PSA for each of the 30 human rights. And it's all professionally done, all professionally managed. They're non-affiliated. They're secular. They get a lot of funding from different organizations, a lot of Scientology. Scientology provides a lot of funding, but all other organizations as well. And so the notion of, if you have people who are gathering for a day of discussion, why not train some youth in their human rights at the same time? Right. Just have another track, right? So how many? Nominally, and I picked the number, it's like 200. Going to train 200 children and youth for every day of discussion, right? And how does that flow out? Well, that flows out pretty good. That adds another 34 times 200 people that you touch in Tanzania alone, right? Then this is where the Tanzanian team really made the contribution. It's like, why don't we train the trainers at each one of these days of discussion? 10. And they continue to propagate the human rights training. Like, holy cow. All right, so let's put some bounds on that. Say you have your day of discussion, you train 200 kids, children and youth in their human rights, as a separate track. Over here you're doing the peace education topics from all the ethnic groups. Over here you're doing your training. Day 2, you bring 10 people back, pre-selected people. They got to be good people, right? In fact, personally, I think that most of them should be women, right? And you train them and you hire them. And their job for the next 36 months is to train at least 20 people per month. Has to be trackable. Got to take names.
Yeah.
You got to have that checked by the region manager, right? So you're going to continue the region manager's job after the day of discussion. Maybe not as busy as they were, but you keep them employed, at least part-time employed. And if you start running the numbers of what this equates to, and you got to blockchain that because you just would be processing payroll too much to try and make that work, right?
Right.
So you bring some, and you want to avoid any corruption anyway. So blockchaining is a good option. Throw some technology at that.
Yeah.
You wind up at the end of the day, after you're all done in about 5 years, you have trained 251,600 children and youth in their human rights as a byproduct of accelerating the timeline for peace education, which has to be done anyway, and it saves lives.
Wow.
So now, you're creating now over 400 jobs in Tanzania.
And that's just one.
That's just one country.
It's just one country.
One country.
My brother.